name is Michael. And first off, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to present my work at this conference and for moving the conference to a virtual realm instead of potentially repeatedly postponing it or canceling it altogether. While the conference will of course lack important dimensions of face-to-face conferencing, there are also some definitive advantages to this virtual endeavor, I would argue. The conference's carbon footprint being one of them, but it gets kind of preaching to the converted here. So just again, thanks for making this possible. As a sort of framing from a paper, I submitted an abstract to this conference while being a postdoc in a project called Entrepreneurship Stereo Meets the USA at the University of Graz in Austria. That project explores Austrian vis-a-vis American entrepreneurial practices and ideas about and of entrepreneurship. I am in fact still part of and hired in that project, but in early March I accepted another postdoc position, which I've now officially had since mid-April. That second postdoc is at the University of Oldenburg in Germany, and where I'm in a project called Science in TV Series. Despite the title, we deal with popular culture on a more general level, especially audiovisual media. So in a way, the presentation you're about to hear and see will bring these two projects together, as it will explore the intersections of science, entrepreneurial practice, and popular culture. And in line with the conference title, of course, the Anthropocene or Mechas rather than Necrocene will pop up a couple of times as well. So much for these prelude of sorts. After all, I shouldn't waste too much time here. The title of my presentation or my paper is Creative Destruction and Cycles of Extinction and De-extinction, Necropreneurship in Jurassic World Evolution. In Frankenstein, and I'll quote a couple of times from the book now, Victor Frankenstein examines the causes of life. In the course of his studies, he concludes that life and death are ideal bounds he needs to break through before he will be able to bestow animation upon lifeless matter. Unquote. Of course, Frankenstein demonstrates hubris here and could be said to embody a tendency among enlightened human beings in the global north, namely to view limits, especially naturally imposed ones, as challenges that need to be overcome and ideally mastered. The variety of phenomena connected to the Anthropocene, from anthropogenic global warming and ocean acidification to plastic pollution and biodiversity loss, are often considered so massive that their scale renders them incomprehensible to human beings. In addition, there don't seem to be ways to master them. Arguably, the Anthropocene reveals human mastery of the planet to be nothing but an illusion. As a result, the Anthropocene and the phenomena connected to it are often said to evoke feelings of powerlessness and cause paralysis. But it doesn't have to be this way. In the introduction to his edited volume After Extinction, Richard Grusin raises a simple but simultaneously very complex and profound question. In fact, he arguably invokes a future ghost when he wonders, quote, what comes after extinction, unquote. For some scientists, the answer to this question seems relatively simple, maybe even too simple. After extinction comes de-extinction. Indeed, Stuart Brand, who became famous as the man behind the Whole Earth catalog in the late 1960s and early 1970s, has noted, quote, that something as irreversible and final as extinction might be reversed is a stunning realization. The imagination soars. Just the thought of mammoths and passenger pigeons alive again invokes the awe and wonder that drives all conversation at its deepest level, unquote. Brand imagines what amounts to a reset button, which will allow humankind to undo past mistakes here. And the reset is for the benefit of a better future. Brand's wording indicates that while de-extinction, that is, the resurrection of extinct species, might sound like little more than speculation in science fiction and or fantasy, species have in fact been de-extincted, as weird as that word may sound. The Pyrenean ibex was declared extinct on January 6, 2000. Its population dwindled due to overhunting and habitat loss. On top, populations were decimated by sarcoptic mange outbreaks in the 1980s and early 1990s. But as early as 1992, scientists actually succeeded in creating Bucardo, as the subspecies is also called, embryos in the lab. A few years later, these embryos were transferred into domestic goats, but the domestic goats' uterus cannot properly nourish the Bucardo. So the domestic goats gave birth to ghastly abominations, arguably rendering manifest the monstrous reproduction the scientists were engaged in. In the next step, Scientists hybridized domestic goats with Spanish ibex over several generations before using the hybrids as breeding vessels for bucardo embryos. On July 30th, 2003, then, one of the hybrids actually calved a Pyrenean ibex. The bucardo was no longer extinct. However, the little creature died after just a few minutes due to the deformation of her lungs. A hideous progeny produced by crossbreeding and other forms of human tampering with life, the calf so light of the earth without any chance of survival. The subspecies went extinct for a second time minutes after it had become de-extinct. In a paper on the bucardo de-extinction project, Jose Falk, the lead scientist, and his team conclude that for, quote, species such as bucardo, cloning is the only possibility to avoid its complete disappearance, unquote. Biotechnology, as well as fear about biodiversity loss here. In fact, biotechnology becomes a tool for reversing species loss. One of the main problems with relying on biotechnology in this context is, well, a matter of context. Responding to plans of intervening in the impending extinction of the northern white rhino by using biotechnology, biologist Stuart Pimas, for example, stressed that, quote, we still live in a world in which we have lost an enormous number of rhinos to poaching, and if we have any chance of putting their descendants back into the wild, we'll have to prevent them from being killed the moment they're released, unquote. Now, rhino horn is valuable. That much probably everybody knows. And conservation groups do not want the value of rhino horn to be publicized for three reasons. A, it's an illegal trade, which is why there are no official numbers. B, potential criminals might be encouraged to actually enter the trade upon hearing how much money people actually pay for rhino horn. And C, consumer demand might actually rise because of stockpiling rhino horn for investment purposes. That would then lead to an increase in demand, which would lead to an increase in prices, potentially more poachers, and so on. Nevertheless, since part of my point here revolves around what Jason Moore has dubbed the cheapening of nature and the resultant exploitation of nature, I'd like to point out that a 2017 article in The Guardian suggested that a kilogram of rhino horn peaked at $65,000 back in 2012. That's still more than the current per kilo price of gold, without adjustments for inflation. In simple terms, it seems like exterminating endangered species apparently pays good money. To return to the Pyrenean ibex for a moment, although the extinction experiment failed and the scientists have yet to succeed in replicating the feat achieved in 2003, the ibex was just a starting point. In fact, it was quickly overshadowed by other projects in the public imagination, the de-extinction of the passenger pigeon and the woolly mammoth in particular. Indeed, popular science books, magazines, and newspapers have effectively turned the mammoth into an, if not the, icon of de-extinction. Scientists working in the field of de-extinction, on the other hand, have argued that there is a voice that's glaringly absent from the discourse from the public discourse on de-extinction, namely that of de-extinction practitioners. In a 2018 journal article, Ben Novak, for example, complains, quote, not one de-extinction paper preceding this manuscript has been authored by a scientist working on de-extinction breeding programs at the center of critical attention, unquote. However, as I guess we all know, publications in peer-reviewed journals rarely shape the public imagination. Press releases and science journalism have much more of an impact in this respect. As political scientist Amy Fletcher thus concludes in a recent book on de-extinction, much of the reporting in the media focuses on, quote, initial promising results that are neither replicated nor confirmed, unquote. In other words, speculating about the question of what would happen if drives much of the fascination with de-extinction. In fact, if one takes a look at the website of the nonprofit organization Revive and Restore, the de-extinction of the passenger pigeon, which has been extinct since 1914, and the woolly mammoth, which has been extinct for roughly 4,000 years, are two of only 6 projects listed on the website. No doubt, using biotechnology to protect the horseshoe crab and to counter coral reef bleaching, which are 2 of the other 4 projects, sound like projects one might support rather easily. But why the focus on animals that have been extinct for 100, if not thousands of years? Why the focus on these icons of extinction? In the words of Ashley Dawson, quote, "The extinction crisis offers an opportunity to capital for a new round of acclimation," unquote. In the name of coping with the decimation of flora and fauna around the planet, the most advanced sectors of capital are rolling out new biotechnologies that we are told promise to revive the charismatic extinct species like the mastodon. Unquote. In other words, these icons of extinction simply sell. Their cultural value attracts venture capital, which may be invested in other, maybe less attractive, but maybe also more important projects. Now, to be clear, and that should be clear from the previous point, I don't mean to bash the extinction here. The topic is much too complex for a one-sided argument. What I mean to highlight, though, is the capitalist drive undergirding the hype surrounding specific de-extinction projects. What I will do in the remaining minutes is to turn to a franchise that's inextricably interconnected with the public understanding of the extinction: Jurassic Park / Jurassic World. Ever since Michael Crichton's original novel was published back in November 1990, the franchise has influenced the public understanding of the extinction. Of course, we now know that the way in which the franchise depicts the extinction, that is by extracting dinosaur DNA from insects fossilized in amber and then combining dinosaur DNA with frog DNA, is pure science fiction. Also, there is no doubt that the entire franchise taps into fears related to biotechnology. However, by looking at the video game Jurassic World Evolution, which was released pretty exactly 2 years ago, I'd like to highlight here that the franchise is just as much, if not more, interested in the workings of capitalism. And the video game, as a business simulation, makes this aspect explicit. Now, a number of scholars have commented on one of the apparent paradoxes in the Jurassic World / Park films. These are multi-million-dollar entertainment products that pretend to critique capitalism. Well, Jurassic World Evolution, similar to the films, features the critical voices of characters Dr. Ian Malcolm, Raptor Whisperer Owen Grady, and Jurassic World Operations Manager turned dinosaur conservationist Claire Dearing. The game puts players into the role of what I'd like to call necropreneurs, and that's key. Jurassic World Evolution is a pretty simple business simulation whose main selling points are its affiliation with the franchise and the idea of managing dinosaurs. To be more precise, the video game could be called an entertainment park management simulation. As a result, players are tasked to create zoos populated with prehistoric animals across a number of tropical islands off the coast of Costa Rica. Players need to construct roads, build hotels, and provide restaurants for the visitors to dine in. Most importantly, though, players need to set up research infrastructure to uncover fossils and extract dinosaur DNA to breed the animals and then release them into their enclosures. After all, you wouldn't want a T-Rex to roam freely in your park. Once the animals are released, players need to ensure that the dinosaurs, players' investments after all, remain well-fed, healthy, and satisfied with their lives in captivity. Crucially, the video game uses a mechanic typical of the genre. The further players proceed in the game's technology tree, the better the outcome. In the case of Jurassic World Evolution, that means that the closer players come to fully decoding a dinosaur species' genome, the higher the animal's rating, the more visitors the dinosaur draws into the park, and the more money the park generates. The mere decoding of the dinosaur's DNA is not enough, though, as players can alter the prehistoric animal's genetic information and make the dinosaurs more or less social, more resilient, more aggressive, and so on. The final steps in the biotechnological mastery of prehistoric life are genetic hybrids, introduced to the franchise in the latest films, as you probably know. Of course, as the in-world geneticist Henry Wu is quick to emphasize in Jurassic World, all of the dinosaurs in the Jurassic Park / World franchise are effectively hybrids. But Jurassic World introduced creatures that combine the genetic information of various dinosaur species to the franchise. The Indominus Rex in Jurassic World and the Indoraptor in Fallen Kingdom. To this menagerie of beasts, Jurassic World Evolution adds the Encolodocus, the Spinoraptor, and Stegoceratops. What is crucial here is that effectively the game asks players to de-extinct dinosaurs only to re-extinct them when a better successor is waiting in the pipeline. So the species becomes de-extinct again upon release of the next generation. Becomes de-extinct square, I don't know. In a way, Jurassic World Evolution taps into a very basic understanding of what the economist Joseph Schumpeter termed creative destruction. Schumpeter primarily focused on groundbreaking innovations in manufacturing that lead to the dismantling and or total reconfiguration of an industry. But the term has, especially in recent years, basically taken on a life of its own and taken on different connotations. What has remained unchanged, though, is that creative destruction suggests progress and economic growth by punishing those who simply can't keep up. Justin McBrien's contribution to Anthropocene or Capitalocene, which develops the idea of the Necrocene, is tellingly titled Accumulating Extinction. One of McBrien's key points is that capitalist production draws on past extinctions in the form of fossil fuels and leads to present and future extinctions by the seemingly endless need to grow. Jurassic World Evolution literalizes this idea, as the business players run is based on the idea of resurrecting extinct species, only to kill them off again in order to resurrect a better model. This is accumulating extinction. As such, Jurassic World Evolution asks players to perform what I'd like to label necropreneurship. This concept draws both on the notion of the Necrocene and what Bobby Banerjee has called necrocapitalism, that is, a regime of capital in which colored bodies, black, brown, indigenous, and so on, are disposable to ensure the continued accumulation of capital. Very simplified. While Banerjee focuses on people from the global south, this process is just as true of non-human forms of life. So much for the necro part. On the other hand, a variety of publications have connected entrepreneurship with innovation and value extraction, and extraction is the important part here. Necropreneurship effectively uncovers what entrepreneurial practice in a capitalist system is all about: death, destruction, and extermination, rather than extinction. And this is not a new insight. After all, none other than Schumpeter, often considered to be the key figure in shaping the modern understanding of entrepreneurship, concluded that capitalism ultimately destroys its material foundation. To draw on Dolly Jurgensen's work on recovering lost species, one might say that de-extinction, quote, looks to the past in the service of the future, unquote. De-extinction embodies hope by promising to undo extinction. However, when looking at popular depictions of de-extinction projects past mistakes into the future, which may be repeated, not ad infinitum, because there is an end to this cycle of destruction. William E. Connolly has concluded that, quote, we are participating in a new mass cross-species extinction event triggered by extractive capitalism, unquote. Jurassic World Evolution suggests that extractive capitalism did not simply cause or has had an impact on biodiversity loss across the globe, but rather turns this ecological disaster into another source of income. Ashley Dawson has diagnosed that the Western path progress is based on, quote, an economic system and culture founded on a drive to annihilate everything in its path, unquote. In our world of turbo capitalism, there doesn't seem to be the need to consider long-term effects, not in terms of human lifetimes, definitely not on the scale of geological time. After all, to take a quotation from Ramchandra Guha out of context, quote, in the long run, we're all dead, unquote. Anyways. De-extinction generally oozes nostalgia for a past that never was and promises a future in which biodiversity loss is a problem of the present turned past, a problem left in the rearview mirror of progress. Despite its focus on lush greens and paradisical islands, deep down, Jurassic World Evolution implies what Jerry Canavan has called necrofuturism. The game, quote, premeditates the economic and ecological future that will emerge out of current trends, unquote. Now, Canavan, writing about the film Snowpiercer, suggests that necrofuturism, quote, resigns us to a coming disaster we can anticipate but not prevent, unquote. Jurassic World Evolution, on the other hand, takes this idea a step further. We play our part in bringing about this economic and ecological future. Thank you.